Hello all. So in this video we are going to talk about the second iteration of reading. So ideally in first iteration we have already read the titles, we have read the abstracts, we've gone through the sections, now we know what our contributions are, we know what are the contributions of other people, and after this iteration, after iteration 1, I should have a very bizarre, or I would say I should have little bit of idea what is going on in that area on which I'm working, right? I should be familiar that people are working on a particular technique or a particular group of techniques. People are working on this particular area and they're working on that particular area. Those keywords, those jargon should be there in your head. You should be able to make out that, so and so work is being done in this area and so work is being done out in this area. That openness, that awareness is important, because otherwise you will be lost. You will not be able to, make out that what is going on, right? So after your first iteration, I expect that now you do have a rough idea of your topic and what all is going on in your area. What all is going on in your area, right? Once this is done, then we are going to get into actual reading, right? So this is where we are doing actual reading, and I would request you here to decode the papers, right? One by one, one by one. So you pick up a paper and you start reading from introduction, line by line, line by line, line by line, then paragraph by paragraph, paragraph by paragraph, right? So if you had 3 paragraphs in introduction, I want you to think that how they started the introduction, start kaise kiya tha, how that argument was started or launched, what is it that they have used, what kind of claims and what kind of information they have used, how much depth they have touched, how much depth they have touched, are they connected, are they connected? Obviously they will be connected. Next question is, if yes, how? Now this is where you have to think a lot, right? Why reading is so important, why reading is such an important part of the activity, because whatever goes in your head, it will be processed there, and only that will be used to write it down, right? Ideally it would not be like कि एक पेपर में से उठा के copy paste कर दिया दूसरी तरफ, right? That is not how it works. You will be reading 10, 20 papers, and then you're going to think about it, that okay, so and so and so and so, this is working this way and that is working that way, and then you're going to sit on your particular work and write about it and support it with different references. So in the second iteration, now I want you to go through your papers one by one and read it roughly, the entire paper. So if you have 20 papers by that time, and ideally every paper has 10 pages, let's assume, then you will have to read 200 pages in total, right? अब आप इसको ऊपर से पढ़ो कि गहराई में पढ़ो, that is totally up to you, but you have to go through these 200 pages. Now this is a huge task. That is exactly why it is important to go through the searching process very carefully. That is why it is important to do that. If you remember in the last video, I asked you to do this again. ये दोबारा करने को बोला था मैंने. If you feel like you're not satisfied, you do it again. If you're here in this iteration, if you feel that whatever I'm doing in your first iteration, if you feel like it is not enough, you redo it. Because अगर ये गलत है ना, if this area is wrong, then I'm damn sure the rest of the things are going to be wrong. अपने आप सही नहीं कर पाओगे, right? That is why it's important to have that confidence and that faith coming from within, that I am going in the correct direction, and that has to come from within. It cannot come, you cannot come to me and ask me, ma'am, is it enough or is it that? Yes, I can answer those questions, but for that I will have to sit with you for half an hour, maybe for an hour, and we can discuss it out, that whether what you're doing is falling in the scope or falling out of scope. So it will take time, but at the end of the day, if your heart is saying that your resource pool is enough, then it is enough. If your heart is saying that it is not enough, then it is better to redo it. Because ultimately when you will be entering the second stage of iteration, you're going to read those papers line by line, and यूजलेस पेपर पढ़ के कोई फ़ायदा नहीं होगा, है ना. सो आई होप आई एम मेकिंग सेंस in that particular direction. So moving on to this redo wala part, right? If you feel after first iteration that it is not enough, then you better redo it, because what we are doing here is iteration 1 mein we are simply curating, we are finding out that which is important so that we may get into the deeper layers, right? Once you have curated, once you have made that list or that pool of papers, that means tentatively you are going to read 200 to 300 pages, and out of these 200 to 300 pages you are going to find out what is it that works for you, what is it that doesn't work for you, what are those titles that are working for you, what are those titles that are not working for you, what is that piece of information that is important for you to use, and where you will find it. Obviously you're not going to dream about it, right? So such kind of information will always come from existing pool of papers, and that you have to curate. So abhi tak, if I track my own journey or your journey, ideally you have the titles, then you searched for papers, you found out and you took papers, and you made a pool. On this pool you did iteration 1. After iteration 1 you have your contributions and you have your sections tentative, and you know whether your content is enough or not. Then you're going to get into iteration number 2, and this is where things get very very interesting, because we are decoding. Please remember this word, decode. And also remember, I don't say anything uselessly, everything has a significance, so understand that you have to decode those papers, meaning you have to break down those papers one by one in order to understand the anatomy of writing a paper, or how to write a paper, right? Those things can only be understood by going through the existing works. So the first thing is to decode the papers. The second thing is to understand flow. Most importantly, understand tools if they are available, understand how to work and what to work on and why to work. Understand how to write also, right? So when you will be reading line by line, when you will reach this stage where you're reading papers line by line, when you're reading introduction of all the papers, in the second iteration you'll be going through everything, right? So if you feel like it is getting very heavier for you, या समझ में नहीं आ रहा है, अजीब अगर फील होता है तो थोड़ा हल्का पढ़ लेना, do a lighter reading, right? If you feel like you are feeling empowered and अच्छा लग रहा है पढ़ के, then do an intensive reading. I would say intensive reading. So it depends on you. If whatever works for you, please remember, whatever works for you is fine. Whatever works for you is fine. If something is making you understand, it might be a YouTube video, it might be a blog. If it is making you understand things, you go for it. But ultimately, for standard approval or standard proving, you have to come back to those papers and see that what is the standard they have achieved. Now, second iteration mein, why reading line by line is important, or why it will help you, or why this decoding word is very important, is because you will be finding few figures, you will be finding technical background of those technologies, you'll be finding how to make those tables, how to put your argument forward, how to propose new things, such kind of things. It's not like if I've given you few titles, obviously they've come from my head because I've read enough, but they're also coming from the pool of literature which is already there. For example, if one person has proposed a particular technique, I will read this technique and I will find out that there are 5 parameters that are used in this technique. Then I'm going to play with these parameters and maybe propose a new technique with 7 parameters, right? Now, this new work has its roots in this previous work, right? That means I can take as much as I want from these previous works. I just have to build on top of it. So same thing is helpful in the second iteration, where you're going to decode and find out how people have worked. And ideally, if you are going through 20-40 paper, then you are learning how 20 people have worked or how 40 people have worked in one particular area, and that will give you enough, I would say, inspiration as well as enough workflow as well as enough proof that it is possible and it can be done, right? You can look at that. Sometimes what happens is algorithm design karni hai, you can look at other algorithms and see what kind of jargon they've used, what kind of elements they've used, how they've proposed it, how they've explained it, and then you can get your creative juices flowing and think how I can, how can I make my own. So in your second stage, you will be thinking and you will be absorbing a lot of words, right? Absorb a lot of words, and these words can simply be absorbed by 2 or 3 ways. One is to highlight whatever you feel is significant for your paper, right? And how you're going to find out whether it is significant or not? By going through your title and by going through your contribution. That is why clarity here is very important. यहाँ contribution में clarity होगी तो you will know that what is it that you want out of this particular paper. अंत दिख जाएगा. You will be able to see that end, right? According to your title and according to your contribution, I want you to highlight in your second iteration. Highlight paragraphs, highlight statistics, highlight references if they are important, highlight the entire sections or maybe entire pages or figures that are important, highlight that whichever you're going to need again, जो भी चीज़ अच्छी लगती है, ठीक है? So simply this is eliminating noise. Whatever is not beneficial to you, you're not highlighting it. Whatever is beneficial to you, you're highlighting it. And in that process, you're going through different statistics also, you're going through different figures also, tables also. Let it brew in your head. Let it brew in your head. Give yourself that time. अपने दिमाग में उसको process करने का time दो. And absorb words. Now what happens is, most of you are going to struggle in writing the paper or even thinking what to write, because things will not come up in your head, right? I will tell you why. Because you've not absorbed enough, right? A tractor will work only when there is enough petrol in it. If there is no petrol, the tractor is not going to work. Same goes for this. If you want to write well, you will have to read well, and you will have to read enough, you will have to decode enough for you to understand, right? The most important word here is you, because at the end of the day, you are the master of your own work, है ना? You have to do it for your own self, and you have to figure out what is working for you and what is not working for you. Sometimes कुछ बच्चों के लिए ऐसा होता है, 2 पेपर पढ़ के they start writing, then they read 2 more, then they start writing, and they do this incremental sort of work. For some it happens like they read 20 papers at once. For some it happens कि 5 एक बार पढ़ते हैं, फिर 5 एक बार, फिर 5 एक बार, फिर 5 एक बार. For some people it is 1 by 1. So you decide what works for you. At the end of the day, I'm simply going to ask, what is it that you have learned, right? Because see, there is this one line and it really influenced me as a person. So the line was, you have to stop standing in your own way, right? Take 1 minute to think about it. And this was a very beautiful and very significant line, right? Many times this happens that things are very clear, we know how to do it, we know the route also, but we keep on standing in our own way. For example, if you've learned one way of writing, you would only want कि मुझे बस इसी writing से लिखवा दो, या मुझे इसी तरीके से करवा दो, या मुझे तो ऐसे ही समझ में आता है, मैं तो ऐसा ही करता हूँ और करती हूँ. You will not try to jump out of that and find out that what works, right? And for that to happen, it is very important to detach yourself from it. At the end of the day, it is just work, and you simply have to work, right? You don't have to add your baggage onto it कि मुझे ये नहीं आता और मुझसे ये नहीं होता और मैं ये नहीं कर पाऊंगी. Such kind of things only reinforce the stigmas in your own head. If you've told to yourself that this is something that I cannot do, and then you're coming to me and you're repeating it, ma'am, ho nahi pa raha, because you will not say it outrightly, you've known me, so you'll say it in discreet ways, लेफ्ट और राइट करके, ऐसा करा था तो फिर वैसा नहीं हुआ, और ये करा था और ये नहीं हुआ. There's so many reasons because there are so many people and every person is unique, right? So I'm not dishonoring your reasons, I'm not dishonoring your growth. I'm simply saying that you have to grow, you have to evolve, right? There has to be growth and there has to be evolution. Otherwise, what is the point? Charles Darwin ne bola tha na, survival of the fittest. Survival of the fittest. So we have to become this fit. We cannot say that we are going to become weak or we are going to become frail and we still want to live long. ऐसा नहीं होता. Rule of the nature is survival of the fittest. And if you want to live, you will have to become fit. You cannot say that it doesn't work otherwise. So same goes for here. If you want to become successful, if you want to become, I would say, if you want to win, right, you will have to step outside your own way. You will have to stop standing in your own way. हम खुद ही प्रॉब्लम बन के खुद ही की ज़िंदगी के रास्ते में खड़े हो जाते हैं. सो स्टॉप डूइंग दैट. फाइंड आउट थिंग्स दैट आर वर्किंग फॉर यू एंड देन बैक देम अप. टेल देम दैट दिस इज हाउ इट वर्क्स फॉर मी. Or find out those things that are hampering your growth, right? And if you need support or help, again, I'm always there, but you will have to come and you'll have to talk. That is one thing. Second, we are here on iteration number 2. Coming back to the topic. So the iteration number 2 is basically going line by line. I will just write it here. So iteration number 2 is reading exhaustively, line by line, decoding everything. Iteration 1 is title, section, headings of the paper, contribution, abstract and conclusion. Right? So these are the things that you are doing in sphere 1. Title, section, abstract, conclusion. This is your iteration 1, which is curating, as we are calling it. Iteration number 2 is decoding the paper. So here you have to read line by line, and you have to read line by line. You have to decode. You have to understand the flow of information. You have to understand the how of a work, how a particular person has written, how long are the sentences, how they've used commas, how they've made it very compact, how they've written it, how a paragraph is written. In some papers you'll find long paragraphs, in some you're going to find smaller paragraphs, in some you're going to find more technical words, in some you're going to find less technical words. I want you to analyze all of this. I want you to absorb all of this. Absorb, because these are the words or these are the jargons that you're going to use. I want you to open your mind and break it down. Like, go with that perspective कि मुझे इस पेपर को तोड़ देना है. I have to break down this paper just to understand कि किया क्या इन्होंने. Because then only you will be able to do it yourself. And then we are going to enter one of the most significant iterations, that is third and fourth. We'll do that in the next video. But as of now, I again want to emphasize what you're going to do in iteration number 2, right? After reading all the papers, at least one go, right? वो ऊपर से हो, broader हो, narrower हो, that is totally up to you. After going through all of that papers, इसको हम literature review भी बोलेंगे. जो हमारा resource pool है ना, उसको go through करने के बाद, I want you to again ask this question: Is it enough? Is it enough? ठीक है? Do I need more? Do I need more? Now these are the questions that only you can answer, because you are going to determine the depth of your study. Only you are going to determine the depth of your study. So you have to limit also. एक point पे आके हमें रुकना भी पड़ता है. Otherwise तो non-stop ही हो जाएगा. You can read, you can go through papers, you'll find thousands and 2,000 papers. We cannot study 1,000, 2,000 papers, but we still can study 20 papers or 50 papers. But these 20 should be meaningful. ये 20 भी meaningless हो गए और मैंने पढ़ लिया और मैंने मेहनत भी कर दिया, मैंने पेपर भी बना दिया, उसका भी कोई फ़ायदा नहीं है ना. It's practically garbage, or it is of no use. So I want you to ask this question again once your second iteration is over. That is it enough whatever I have read? Do I need more? If you need more, you search a little bit more. I'm not saying that you redo the entire thing again, but try to search it again and little bit, and maybe add plus 5 more resources, plus 3 more resources, but be very, very specific, right? Because you've already passed iteration 1. So be very specific over here and read first before determining whether you need it or you don't need it. Ideally, after your second iteration, you should have, that much of wisdom or that much of faith that this is my resource pool. This is my resource pool. I know what all is there in my resource pool. Out of this, I'm going to work on my particular contributions towards my particular paper, right? So you'll have that confidence कि मुझे क्या करना है. And after second iteration, ideally you're going to determine the kind of figures that are going to be there, the kind of tables that are going to be there, the kind of sections that are going to be there, right? And then we start writing, of course. So in the next video, we are again going to talk about reading, and ideally that is going to be your third iteration, right? And parallelly we'll start talking about writing as well. Again, as usual, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box below. But for now, I think it would be better if I close this with a beautiful, not beautiful, but meaningful quote, right? Say, I'll write this. One's true worth. If you're busy, you can close this video also. One's true worth as a human being is not a matter of outward appearances, is not a matter of outward appearances or titles, but derives rather from the breadth of one's spirit. Everything comes down to faith and conviction. To faith and conviction. It is what is in one's heart and the substance of one's action that count. So ideally, where is my pencil? Yes. So they are saying that one's true worth as a human being. First of all, we are trying to increase our worth only. That is why you're here. Why your parents have sent you to an institution. They've sent you here to increase your worth as an individual, right? So this line says that one's true worth as a human being is not a matter of outward appearances or titles. So our names, our clothes, our degrees, our reputations, all of that goes out of the window, right? So your true worth is not determined whether you are named Hema or Malini or Rekha or Pushpa. It doesn't matter. It is just a name. It is just a body. It is not determined by your gender either, right? Male or female, it is just a gender. But it derives rather from the breadth of one's spirit, right? You look at a lion and the way a majestic lion roars, everything shakes, even the nature dances because of the spirit of a lion. You look at a deer, right? They're true to their nature. As human beings, we have very wide or very broad nature, I would say. But how are you going to determine whether you're worthy or not? And that can be determined by using or by measuring the breadth of your life force, of your spirit. And that spirit is in your head. And I want you to work on that spirit. When you're reading a research work also, you determine that, you're worthy, you're capable enough to decode that and then work it out in your own manner, right? That was also done by a human being. This is also done by a human being. That is why this keyword becomes very, very important, human being. Next, everything comes down to faith and conviction. You need to have that faith in your own head. For example, I was looking at people who are doing this initiative with me. There are 70 people. Out of 70, there are 30 who are active. Out of those 30 also, there would be hardly 15 or 20 people who would be able to genuinely struggle. Because some of them, if I make a yardstick, some of them will drop out here, some of them will drop out here, some of them will drop out here, and ideally in the end there would be 5 or there would be 10 who are genuinely going to reach the end. Because end में पहुंचना, climbing a mountain is tough. जैसे आप scaling शुरू करते हो, it is the easier in the beginning, but it gets harder and harder and harder, and that is why it is significant to scale a mountain peak, right? Because of it is what it is. So moving on, last line, it is what in one's heart and substance of one's actions that count. At the end of the day, your actions, your conviction in your own self, and what is there in your own heart, that is going to matter at the end of the day. So think how you're thinking, observe how you are behaving with your own self, observe how you're talking to your own self, and observe how you are approaching this particular initiative or this particular problem, right? The end goal here is to publish a research paper that is worthy of an international conference. That is our goal. Once we achieve that goal, we're going to pick up another goal. But as of now, you should only have your eyes on that goal, that this is what I have to do, right? So that is all for this video. Next video, we're going to talk about reading part 3. And we might have reading part 4, but that will come later on. Abhi ke liye we are going to stop at reading part 3, and then we are going to talk about writing, how to write. Because obviously once you read, you will have to write. So see you then. Meanwhile, you can put your questions in the chat box as usual. Thank you. Have a great day.